Hello, everyone. I'm Michael Tomasky. I'm the editor of The New Republic, and this is the new edition of Tomaskycast, a production of TNR Video. And I am joined in this one by Brynn Tannehill, author and analyst and pundit. Hi, Brynn.
Morning. How are you?
I'm doing fine, thanks. So thank you so much for being with me. Brynn wrote a book last year called American Fascism that's just chilling, and I wanted to bring her on here to talk about the book. And the reason I'm having her now, as opposed to when the book came out, is that just earlier this week, she wrote this Twitter thread after the Roe leak, the Alito opinion leak, that spelled out some very ominous future for this country that I read at 2 o'clock in the morning, Tuesday night or Wednesday morning when I couldn't sleep, and it just practically made me want to shoot myself. And it was very chilling. But Brynn, is anything else you want to say about yourself by way of introduction to folks?
So my name is Brynn Tannehill. I went to the Naval Academy, did my postgraduate work at the Air Force Institute of Technology, did 4 deployments to the sandbox as an aviator and an analyst with the Navy. And I've worked for the past 10 years or so in defense industry as a scientist, researcher, and analyst. And today I work for a think tank in the DC area.
She knows what she's talking about. So let's get right now to this Twitter thread where you started out by talking about Roe, and if the Roe decision goes the way that Alito outlined. And the very first thing you said is, because of non-proportional representation and demographics, in order to break the filibuster and overcome the R+6 or 7 bias in the Senate, R being Republican, of course, Democrats would need to win 3 straight elections by 19 points to make abortion legally nationally. Now that's really chilling. So just expand on how that came to be and why that is.
So to kind of expand on that, like you mentioned, because small, less populous states have 2 votes, and places like California and New York and other more populous states also have 2 votes in the Senate, small rural red states have a disproportionate impact on the Senate, right?
Right.
And when you do calculations of, well, what percentage of the national vote would have to go to Democrats and what percent would have to go to Republicans, you would need to break even, you need Democrats to win by 6 or 7 points on a national level every cycle just to have a 50-50 Senate, right?
Right.
And we got the Senate that we have that's 50-50 because we had a +8, +9 blue wave election in 2018, and we had a break even +4.55 in 2020. Yeah. But in order to get to 60 Democratic votes in the Senate, Democrats would have to consistently win by about 19 points in the national vote because of the built-in bias due to non-proportional representation in the Senate. And that's to overcome the filibuster.
Yeah. And what about, there is, of course, a possibility of overcoming a filibuster at the beginning of a new congressional session with a simple majority, if the Democrats have 51 who will vote to do that. The odds of that are a little less daunting, but still pretty steep, eh?
So yeah, I did the calculations in a separate thread, and Democrats would need to win every single toss-up Senate seat in 2022, right? And that means Pennsylvania, Nevada, Arizona, Wisconsin, one other. It's not Ohio. Ohio is considered lean Republican, even though they're putting up, for lack of better terms, a inexperienced, neo-fascist, very scary candidate in J.D. Vance, who's Yale-educated lawyer, but he's speaking directly to the Christian nationalist base.
I met him when he was anti-Trump. He was seemed a reasonable person then. He sure isn't now. with respect to Roe, what do you anticipate out of the Supreme Court? Do you think there's any chance it's going to be any different, the decision, the formal decision, once it's handed down next month, probably?
No, we've seen additional leaks from Politico stating that the reason we are seeing a draft from February is that the majority opinion has not changed and there have been no shifts in votes in that time. We haven't seen any kind of leaks from the potential dissents that we would expect to see from Roberts, which would be his own individual dissent, and then you're probably going to see a joint dissent by the 3 liberal justices.
Yeah. What happens then?
Well, at that point, we have undermined the legal underpinnings of a whole bunch of other civil rights law that we're already starting to see. That would include cases like Griswold, which ruled that married couples have a right to get contraception, that states can't ban that. And that actually came before Roe. That was 1962, I believe. And that was under the concept that there is a fundamental right to privacy implied by the 14th Amendment. A later case, which is on the tip of my tongue, but escapes me at the moment, later on in the early 70s said that, hey, this also applies to unmarried couples as well,
right.
A right to birth control. It also underpins the ruling in Lawrence versus Texas, which ruled that sodomy laws were unconstitutional because consenting adults have a right to have sex in their own homes without interference from the government. It was also one of the underpinnings of Obergefell, which said that bans on same-sex marriage were unconstitutional. We're already seeing conservative states trying to pass laws making it impossible to get various kinds of birth control, including IUDs, because they consider them abortifacients. Not true, but we can see them going after the pill and the morning after pill. And my sources tell me that Texas is absolutely going to mount a challenge to Obergefell as soon as the decision in Dobbs v. Jackson drops. And they have a good chance of winning it, given what Alito and Thomas and Kavanaugh have written about LGBT issues earlier, particularly in Alito's dissents.
Yeah, I agree. I'm very nervous about Obergefell also. On contraception and Griswold, on my more hopeful days, I do think this, and I want to return to same-sex marriage in a second, but on contraception, as I say, on my more hopeful days, I do think about the distinction Coney Barrett made at her hearing between super precedent and mere precedent, right? Where she said super precedent is something that's old and that nobody really disagrees about anymore. So under that logic, they would not overturn, say, Brown v. Board, because there is broad social agreement on that. And she said there's not broad social agreement on abortion, although one could certainly argue that point because 65-70% of America does support Roe, but be that as it may. I think there's broad social agreement on contraception. So on my more optimistic days, I think they might not mess with that. Are you here to tell me I'm wrong about that?
I think you're wrong. I think that they might not be able to get a ban on birth control pills through, but the court is terrible at technical and medical decisions. They're very much likely to buy things as well. It's all up for debate. Who knows? Wow, this is a this is a theological thing. So I could easily see the morning after pill and IUDs being banned on the basis of, well, you can debate whether or not this is abortion, and some people do think this is abortion, so we're going to let it go through. I think you might have a little bit harder time with simply the pill, which prevents ovulation. But I think that a lot of forms of birth control are in grave, grave danger. I also think that they will point to the fact that 30% of Americans still oppose same-sex marriage, 30 to 40%, depending on the poll, probably closer to 30.
Yeah.
And they'll also, Alito has made it very clear that he regards same-sex marriage as being damaging to the religious freedom rights of individuals who don't want to be labeled bigots for opposing same-sex marriage. So I think that same-sex marriage is going to fail that particular test.
Wow. And he's also made it clear that the court shouldn't be concerned about public opinion.
Yes, something that if you go back and look at arguments made by Paul Clement, who has argued in a bunch of right-wing cases,
Yeah.
he uses this phrase is, this is a paraphrase, but you can separate the sheep from the goats later, which is to say Paul Clement has successfully argued, including to Chief Justice Roberts, that, you know what? Yeah, this is going to cause all kinds of chaos, right? And it's going to bring all kinds of cases to the court, and it's going to cause massive social upheaval. But you know what? The court's not worried about that. The court is just focused on this case alone, and the considerations should be done in a bubble where you don't think about what other kinds of problems it's going to cause. Now, yeah, that's one legal line of thinking. The problem is that's exactly the line of thinking the Taney court used in Dred Scott.
It's hard to believe we're talking about Dred Scott in this context. It's just.
Ooh, I wrote an article on that one.
Yeah,
I think that's more applicable than most people realize.
It's just beyond comprehension. Go back and talk a little bit more about what you know about Texas and its planned assault on Obergefell.
So what I'm hearing is that Texas Attorney General Paxton, shortly after the release of Dobbs v. Jackson, is going to issue a legal opinion that Obergefell is no longer good law on the basis of Dobbs v. Jackson. And then you're going to have an instruction from Governor Abbott, who's going to instruct clerks to stop issuing same-sex marriage licenses in Texas. Because
that's
under
summer. That's 2 months.
opinion,
That's 2 months from now, you're saying?
Yeah. Yes. I'm saying this is probably early to mid-July timeframe. I also understand, based off of my sources, that the Alliance Defending Freedom has already lined up plaintiffs, right, to argue that they have been hurt by Obergefell using Alito's exact logic, which is, I'm a Christian who is against same-sex marriage, and the Obergefell decision has affected me personally, and that this is not a victimless decision, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which makes it harder for people who are supporting same-sex marriage to say, this has no bearing, this has no impact on anyone else. Why does the state need to ban it if it has no effect on anyone but me? And Alito, in his previous decisions, has made it absolutely clear that he and Thomas already believe this argument. That overall, when I look at the leaked draft, this was not him saying, no, we won't overturn Obergefell. This was him saying, bring me a case.
Wow. I can't help but think there would be enormous backlash to that sort of thing. So let's talk about the question of backlash for a little bit. First of all, to an overturning of Roe, if it proceeds as the Alito opinion suggested. What do you think happens at the polls November?
And here's the thing, is I don't know the exact answer, but I don't think it's going to be enough to save Democrats this November.
Yeah.
We have inflation going on. We have this is an off-year election where you have a Democrat sitting in the White House. Off-year elections almost always tend to strongly favor the party that's out of power, meaning Republicans. Think back to 2010, the last time we had this situation. You got the red wave and the Tea Party. Also, when you look at the polling data that says that 60% of Americans oppose overturning Wade, but when you ask those same people who are being polled who they're going to vote for on a generic ballot, they still favor Republicans. So yeah, okay, abortion and the economy are the top two issues, but when it comes down to it, is abortion enough to get people to switch their votes? And the answer is, yeah, not enough, not enough,
Yeah.
based off the polling data.
Let me go to another tweet in this thread that you posted a few days ago. This is number 14 out of 25, and this one really made me sit up. Other states are passing fetal personhood amendments that would potentially allow states like Texas, listen to this, folks, to reach into blue states where abortion remains legal, for example, New Mexico, to prosecute doctors in New Mexico who provide abortions to Texans. How do they do that?
So this is much more speculative, but we know that they would like to do it.
Right.
That you've got to understand that the GOP base regards abortion as a slaughter of the innocents worse than the Holocaust. They will do whatever they can to stop abortion. We've seen that through violence and assassinations over decades. But you could try to, charge a woman who tries to go from Texas to New Mexico with kidnapping and murder. Anyone who aided her in getting out of Texas, you could apply the felony murder rule. They're going to try and go after doctors in blue states who perform abortions on people fleeing red states. That's going to be the harder one. But the GOP has made it clear that they will prosecute women who get abortions, and that I don't think that they're going to be afraid to apply the felony murder rule. And
explain what that is.
The felony murder rule is like, let's say I drive us to go get a Slurpee at 7-Eleven. And instead of getting a Slurpee, you go in and you shoot the clerk and take $50 out of the register, right? Okay. Get back in the car and you tell me, they were at a Slurpee's. Drive somewhere fast. We get pulled over and we get arrested, right? I can be charged with the murder of the clerk because I helped you in the getaway and in the act of the murder. Even if I didn't know it, even if I had no intention of murdering the clerk, I could still be charged with murder, right? This is something that you see mostly in southern states, and they would be happy to apply it to anyone. If you start looking at where they're going with similar kinds of holding everybody accountable, look at the new law that just got upheld at the Fifth Circuit, allowing people to sue social media companies if they have unbalanced coverage or if they get banned because they express something that's too conservative, basically, I want to be a Nazi online, and I got banned for being a Nazi racist, therefore give me money.
Yeah, that was astonishing. I even this Supreme Court can't stand still for that, I think. I don't know. Who knows?
It's tough to see where the Supreme Court goes. I think that even Gorsuch is going to recognize that as probably too much in the face of Citizens United and the idea of corporate personhood.
Yeah. Let us hope. We'll see. Anyway, this is a decision that just came down yesterday, folks, in case you're interested in going to read about it. So now let's talk about your book, American Fascism. Pretty blunt title, pretty clear what it's about generally, but just to lay out for folks your thesis and what you cover in the book.
So the book is one of a kind. I read a bunch of books for my lit review, and they usually focused on one aspect of how we got here to teetering on the end of American democracy and how bad that would be and the kind of the forces behind it. My book is the first one that kind of looks at the history of how we got here. It looks at the religious and social factors at play. It looks at the economics of where this movement is coming from. And how wealth inequality has been a contributing factor to this decline. It looks at the legal and electoral mechanisms the GOP has used. It looks at historically what are the characteristics of fascism that most of the acknowledged experts on the subject agree are kind of characteristics, right? Kind of a meta study. And then it looks at other countries that have gone down this path, particularly Hungary and Russia, and a little bit of Turkey, Brazil, India. But Hungary is probably the best example, and Russia's kind of a what happens when you go 10 years beyond Hungary.
Yeah.
And then the final chapter is looking at, well, what would it take for us to escape this, and what kind of hopes do we have going forward? And the answer is there's not a lot of off ramps.
No, there aren't. We'll get to those, but like first, what kind of place are we in right now? How would you characterize where we are right now?
We are approaching, if we have not already hit the event horizon, we're going to hit it in about 6 months, probably.
6 months. And we're going to hit what in 6 months?
We're going to hit Republicans being in charge of the House and the Senate. Once they take back those two, there's no chance of replacing justices. It's going to be very, very difficult to do anything to hold Trump and his administration accountable for what they did in office. It's going to be almost impossible. There's going to be no investigations. It's essentially.
Well, there's going to be investigations. They're just going to be of Hunter Biden.
Yeah, well, they're planning on impeaching President Biden for something.
Whatever.
They'll find it.
Yeah.
But yeah, essentially, once Biden loses, we lose the ability to pass any sort of legislation that would head off a steal of the 2024 election. And what we're looking at in 2024 is if Trump doesn't win the same way he did in 2016 with a minority of the popular vote, but a majority of the Electoral College, we are looking at the Republican Party putting in place people who will submit fake electors, refuse to certify elections in critical states like Georgia, Arizona, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. And once you hit the point where undemocratically elected legislatures that have been gerrymandered into oblivion to the point where they can never be removed from office get to decide who the electors for the state are, who certifies elections. We've crossed the Rubicon, or more like I said, the event horizon. There's no escaping once you hit that point.
Yeah. Let's talk. Move to your last chapter, and let's talk a little bit for a couple minutes about possible ways out of this. Like you, I think about this every day, and like you, I usually feel pretty pessimistic and pretty hopeless. But I do think a couple of things. Number one, most people don't want Donald Trump, I think, to be the president of the United States again. And I know that even if Biden or whoever the Democrat is wins by 8 million popular votes and wins narrowly in the Electoral College, they'll go and try and steal it. But, maybe that won't be possible. Maybe the margins will be enough that they just can't get away with that. And we did see judges, even Trump judges in 2020, uphold the law and do the right thing. So, I don't think it's a given that they managed to win or steal the White House back. What do you think about that?
I think that they're doing everything they can to make sure that doesn't happen again. Keep in mind that when it came to certifying the election, 2/3 of Republicans in the House voted to overturn the election effectively.
Yeah.
And I think that this time you'd probably, by 2024 or early 2025, I think you would only be able to scrape together maybe 2-3 Republicans in the House, maybe 2-3 Republicans in the Senate, maybe 4. Romney, Sass, Murkowski, and Collins are about the only ones that I think wouldn't go along with it if they saw their opportunity to seize permanent power, because that's what this is about. I think that, yes, it's possible that judges will stop them, but Republicans are going to throw so many different ways, go at this so many different ways, that there's a strong chance one of them gets through, that the courts go, well, yeah, okay, this is wrong, but rules as written.
Yeah. The other thing that I put a little bit of faith in is, yeah, I don't know, the idea that most people do support Democratic agenda items. I mean, we see that these the proponents of the constituent elements of Build Back Better all polled pretty well, and people very well in many cases. And most people actually want those things. It's just a question of how the Democrats campaign, and how they message, which is a whole other issue, I guess. But they seem to have a lot of trouble with that. Do you think it can be effective to tell the American people what a danger the Republicans are? Do you think swing voters would respond to that?
My book talks about this a little bit. I agree, Democratic policies are generally more popular, but nobody's paying attention to policy anymore.
Yeah.
It's Mr. Potato Head and Dr. Seuss and transgender people in bathrooms playing sports and critical race theory, and and on top of that, there's the economy, right? Which the president, regardless whether it's Trump or Biden, has limited control over.
Yeah.
So the Democrats are bad at getting messaging and policy out, and Republicans have ceased to care because they can always wave something shiny in front of the public, and particularly their base, to, it's basically agitprop. They're very, very good at agitprop. But the problem is with independents and moderates is that American exceptionalism gets in the way. It's very difficult for people to imagine a post-democratic America. When you tell them, this is who the Republicans are, this is where they're going to go, this is what they want, right?
Yeah.
It's tough to sway people, even people who, because when you tell people, independents, this is who they are, this is what they want, the answer tends to be, oh no, they would never go that far. No, gay marriage is way too popular, they wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
No, they never go after birth control. No. Prosecuting doctors in other states, no, they can't do that, right? People fail to understand how much the GOP wants to reshape American society and how far they're willing to go to do it. But if you listen to their actual think tanks like Heritage and Claremont, they're fairly explicit about where they want to go and what they want to do.
They are.
And this, in another interview I did, I pointed this out, and this is a great quote by Masha Gessen in an article that she published right after the 2016 election, in Rules for Surviving Autocracy. And I mentioned them in my book, and the number one is believe the autocrat,
right,
when he tells you what he wants to do.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just hard to get people to focus on something until it's happened. And so I do think maybe if Roe is overturned in this, rhetorically brutal kind of way that was in the opinion that was leaked, I have to think that'll wake some people up.
I think it's going to wake some people up, but I think the real wake-up call is going to be on birth control and particularly IUDs and morning after pill.
Yeah.
And I think the other wake-up call is going to be the Supreme Court's probably going to rule on Obergefell by 2024, summer 2024,
Yeah.
and no later than summer 2025. And I think that's going to be the moment of, it doesn't matter what we think, it doesn't matter what our opinion is, right? The court is going to do what the court is going to do. Consequences be damned, public opinion be damned, and there's not a thing we can do about it because the GOP now permanently controls the White House and more or less permanently controls the Senate, and neither one is ever going to let through a democratically nominated justice again if they can help it. And Mitch McConnell's already said as much.
Yeah.
He will never and whoever replaces Mitch McConnell is going to be even more ideologically extreme.
Yeah. What are you working on now?
So I have 2 books coming out. Well, one. One is slated for release in February, March of 2023. It's about experiences of parents with trans youth. And the other book I'm working on now, trying to find a publisher, hint, hint, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, is It Will Happen Here, Life in a Post-Democracy America. And it talks about the various ways the US could go once we finally hit that event horizon. And it's going to look at kind of a decision tree, kind of choose your own adventure, look at American dystopia.
Yeah. Well, not uplifting books, but necessary books. I have a book coming out in September myself that's not that uplifting, although I try. But we do what we can do, right, under these circumstances. Brynn, go ahead.
And the best thing I can do is warn people and make the best case that I can that this is an existential threat to women, to LGBT people, and to democracy as we know it, and why losing democracy is so terrifying.
Brynn Tannehill, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.